Bob Glazier is the founder and chairman of the board of Acceleration Partners. He's the author of the inspirational newsletter Friday Forward. And how many people are subscribed to Friday Forward now?
There's a couple 100,000 that get it each week through all the different channels.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch. Who in this room gets the Friday Forward emails? Only two. Yeah, you should get on it. It's actually really good. #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller and USA Today bestseller of 5 books now, including Elevate, How to Thrive in the Virtual Workplace. He's also the host of the Elevate podcast. Where the hell is this page 2 here? Did I lose half of your bio? Or is that
that's good. That's good enough. All good.
Let's go with that. I think I lost the other half of your bio though. That's weird. And then I also was able to work really closely with Bob and his COO, who's now President Matt Wool. Matt was one of the founding members of the CO Alliance. I coached Bob for a while. We spent a lot of time at MIT. And by the way, we're actually going to be hosting next September's CO Alliance event at Endicott House at MIT as well.
Oh, awesome. That's 5 minutes from me.
Yeah, it'll be fun. All right. So Bob, you got the floor. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks everyone. Sorry I can't be there in person, but I find when we're talking about virtual teams, then we need a little bit of practice what we preach. So most of us, I've been saying this up until the last month or two, we feel like we survived 2020, 2021, although now it feels like we need to survive 2022 again. And a lot of companies transition to remote work with no preparation, no experience, and under pretty, I think, stressful and non-ideal conditions. But I think for a lot of companies, and now thinking forward, it actually went a lot better than they expected and made them sort of rethink their work environment as well as their employees, desires made them rethink that. And so the key thing now, the question is what comes next? And shockingly, even though it's 2022 at this point, I don't think a lot of companies have fully thought through this. Some are still trying to not make the hard decisions or kind of punt it forward. But I really think it's time to think about how, remote or hybrid work is going to figure into the future and the culture of the type of companies that we want to build. And look, I think businesses can choose from a lot of different options when they think about how they want to build their company. But I think if you're sitting there of a strategy, hoping we're going to go back to 2019, I just don't think that's going to happen. Many of the changes and trends that we're seeing were actually already underway. I think the pandemic might have just advanced them 5 to 10 years. And, companies need to decide how remote and flexible work is going to fit in their workplaces. I can tell you from our own experience of 14 years now, that it can be highly effective. And particularly in non-pandemic times. So, in the last year or so, a few CEOs have come out with some notable comments. You've got Goldman Sachs, David Solomon, is not a new normal, it's an aberration. We're going to correct as soon as possible. Solomon actually said this 2 weeks before Goldman came out. This is when everyone was still working at home with their earnings and had the best revenue and profit quarter in the history of the company with everyone working from home. So I think the aberration comment felt like a little bit of a slap in the face to people there. Then you have Reed Hastings. I don't see any positives. And then the disingenuous probably comment of the century from the guy whose business model is predicated on people coming back to the office. Those who are very least engaged are very comfortable working from home. Again, there have been a lot of opinions stated as fact about this, which I think is interesting. And look, all of these gentlemen are older gentlemen and have millions of dollars of office space signed for 5 to 10 years. So you may want to take their strategy with a grain of salt. And a lot of what I've heard from these folks actually reminded me of a lot of CEOs in 1998 when the internet and technology was coming out. A lot of them, kind of bragged that they didn't look at their email. That was something their secretary did. Most of those folks, and Cam and I are old enough to remember this, they were all gone in a couple of years. Turns out you did need to know how to use a computer and answer your email to sort of be a CEO in a world that was increasingly going to be adopting technology as part of everything. And what this just highlights is, I think, the danger of sunk costs and sunk cost fallacy. I think whatever decision you want to make for your business about your workplace structure and your culture, it's got to be made looking forward and not backwards. Mark Cuban, ironically, used this a lot last year. I don't hear him using as much now. But he used to say, when he's talking about cryptocurrency, kind of the supply and demand are undefeated. And I do agree with that. If there are a large number of employees who want to work remotely, they want flexible work, it's kind of in their top 2 or 3 things they want, and their companies allow them to do that, they're going to find each other. And so, companies that want to adopt more, strict definition of work are going to have to decide, are they going to lose top, they're going to force everyone to return to the office and lose top talent after seeing that work can get done outside the office. And, I've been talking about this for a while, and, the D-Day has been kind of pushed back for everyone because of the different variants. But if you watch what's happening now with, Apple and Netflix, Tesla, and they're just not getting people, they're just refusing to come back. And there's a little bit of a standoff going on. So right when I released my book, How to Make Virtual Teams Work, I actually surveyed 2,000 employees that work remotely during the pandemic. Interestingly, 52% of them were in office fully before the pandemic. 68% wanted to continue working remotely, either most or all of the time, and 2% wanted to return to work full time. Now that might have changed a little bit, but again, if you're supply and demand in a free, efficient markets person, you might want to take those numbers seriously in terms of thinking about where you're going to get your employees from. And I truly believe that this is the biggest decision companies have made overall about their work kind of environment and practice and strategy since that decision to kind of ignore this internet thing or not ignore it back in 98 to 2000. And how they handle this is going to impact their business and their competitive positioning for years to come. So our journey with remote work actually didn't start with some great plan. It started in 2007. We were actually just trying to solve the biggest pain point in our business. We weren't actually trying to be a remote organization. By 2011, we had a team of 7. We had about $1 million in revenue. We help companies with large scale affiliate programs, companies like Uber, Target, Airbnb, Etsy, and Adidas. It's a very specialized field, and we needed senior level talent, which was in really short supply and located kind of all over the US. So we just decided we were going to hire the talent where we could find them. This is kind of the days before before Zoom. And we always kind of assumed that we would grow out of this and into the offices and then grow up. But it actually went really well. And people liked our culture of flexibility and accountability. It was actually never about remote work. I would be asked to be on these like remote work podcasts and things at the time where, it was all like companies that were bragging that everyone was nomadic. And even though we were 100% remote, I was like, I'm not sort of an evangelist necessarily for that movement, but like our people have just developed. They say, look, if we're accountable, can we have flexibility? And it just became a way that we wanted to work. So soon we began to think about a vision for remote culture that was scalable, not only nationally, but globally with hundreds of employees. And, since we made that decision to go all in around 2010, our revenue growth has grown 4,000%. We've grown from 7 to 330 employees, and we've won over 25 Best Places to Work awards. As being a fully remote company, in fact, the Small Giants Award that we won as one of America's best small businesses, when we won it, the blurb that they wrote up in the magazine said, apparently, Acceleration Partners is a very great place to work, even though they don't have one. So this was even kind of, taboo a few years ago. And frankly, it's something that we almost hid from clients for a while. So I thought I'd spend a little time thinking about the playbook that we use to build our culture, starting with culture generally, and then getting into like what's necessary in the world of remote and hybrid work, both from the employee side, which I think is interesting, and the manager side, which is a whole nother piece, and ponder a little bit on the path forward. So I actually, maybe around the first time I met Cam, I used to think that culture and values were kind of bullshit. And, because I walk into companies and I'd see crap like this on the wall, and I'd see it in any offices. It was like Pleasantville, and they all sounded the same. There's no differentiated point of view. But honestly, I just didn't see anyone living up to it or acting up to it. In fact, I took this picture in some office I was in, and I had a really awkward moment where I posted this as part of an article on like what fake core values are and real core values. And this woman clearly didn't read the article from London. She wrote to me and said, where did you get that picture? I love it. It looks just like my company's core values, which led to a slightly awkward interaction. So I thought it'd be helpful in terms of how I think about values to sort of compare and contrast two companies. So the first is United Airlines, which, you know, give them some credit, they're getting somewhat better. But United has these core values: we fly right, we fly friendly, we fly together, and we fly above and beyond. Sounds so beautiful. Now, if we were all in person, I can't necessarily see everyone's hands. I can see you all, but you know, I would ask, how might someone know that these are kind of BS and not United's cultural values? And someone inevitably raises their hand and gets it right. So we'll give one of you credit. But some of you might remember a story a few years ago where, rather than give a passenger like $800 for a flight that they overbooked, United dragged him off the plane and bloodied him by hitting his head on something while everyone was videotaping it. And I don't think there were a lot of us who would define that as flying friendly, flying friendly, or flying right, or flying above and beyond. I will say, though, United was very good at connecting and united people of the world, you know, against them. In fact, they lost almost like $800 million in market cap, I think, in the weeks after this, and it created an absolute PR nightmare. I know some of you might be an EO, and actually, you know, it was an EO event in Buenos Aires, Argentina, that really permanently changed my view on culture. I actually hate flying Southwest Airlines. It's not the value proposition I like, but I've always been so impressed with the business they built. And Herb Kelleher was sort of one of my business idols when he was alive. And so I knew a lot about Herb, and I knew a lot about the airline. And this person at the event was actually talking about interviewing Kelleher and saying to him, how from 1980 to 2000 did you make more money than every US airline? And he said that Kelleher said to him just one word, and he said culture. And having known so much about their strategy and their secondary airports and their one plane, and they turn them faster and they're low cost, like, I really didn't expect that to be the answer. And so I started looking into what is it that companies, you know, like Southwest do differently. And interestingly, if you actually went and looked up Southwest core values at the time, you would see, you know, they had a statement: connect to people what's important in their lives through friendly, reliable, low-cost air travel. That's what they do. And then they had some pretty differentiated values: live the Southwest way, warrior spirit, servant's heart, and fun-loving attitude. And then they had work the Southwest way: work safely, wow our customers, and keep costs low. And again, they sound great on paper, but there was a story a few years ago about a woman named Peggy Yulee. So her Southwest flight from Raleigh-Durham to Chicago was taxiing on the runway when the pilot suddenly turned around and headed back to the gate. And the cabin crew asked her to get off the plane, and she assumed she was on the wrong plane and caused like a security nightmare. But after she was back in the terminal, the crew told her that her son had been in a terrible accident in Denver and was in a coma. And so here's what the crew did next, or the employees did next. They rebooked her on the next flight to Denver. They offered her a private area that she could wait for her flight. They rerouted her luggage to Denver. They let her board first, gave her a box lunch when she got off the plane, delivered her luggage to where she was staying, never asked for payment, and someone followed up to see how her son was doing. And here's the key point: no one told them to do this. It wasn't in a manual. There wasn't a playbook for this. They were actually just living the core values, which had been operationalized, including, you know, some of the ones that you saw before, like servant's heart and wow our customers. And unlike United, Southwest got tons of public PR and praise, and probably had their market cap go up as a result of doing this. Again, both things that cost probably hundreds of dollars at the end of the day. So this really brings, we talk a lot about culture, but I don't hear a lot of people define it. And I think, if you're talking about what you want to build, then you need to be able to do that. So there's two definitions that I like of a great culture. And I think they really exemplify the story of United versus Southwest. So the first is, it's your company's operating system, right? It's what you do, it's how you do it, it's how people behave. And the second is, it's like how people make decisions when you're not in the room. And did we see a better example of that in those two examples of not in the same room? So that's like what is culture. Then what makes a great culture, I've actually come up with a formula that I think is pretty simple. And that is, say there's 3 things and 2 modifiers or 5 qualities. A great culture has a clear vision, and Cam was super inspirational for us. If you all haven't done a vivid vision, like that is an anchoring thing for your business. We used it with investors, we used it with our bank. Like I can't tell you how many times that has helped us. So it has a vision, but to make the vision real, you need to have goals and targets and things that make that happen and come to life. And then again, a great company goes after its vision, hits its goals in service of its values. In not good culture, you would go around your values to get to your goals. So I think you have a vision, you have a values, you have goals, and it flows through in that order. And then these 2 modifiers, right? Because I think a great culture has clear vision, clear value, and clear goals, and it has a consistent vision, a consistent value, and consistent goals. I think it's really that simple to have a great culture. And sometimes when I point that out, someone will raise their hand. They'll say, "Bob, but like, what about the people? Like, how, don't the people make up the culture, make a great culture?" And the answer is yes. But I don't think you know what people you need until you define the system and you understand the game you want to play. I also don't think there's a universal definition of a great culture. You can imagine a culture where it's super competitive, high achieving. The company grows 50% a year, 80% of the bonuses go to 20% of the people. And another one where it grows 5% a year in a non-competitive market. There's not really a lot of increases because the business doesn't do better. They promote family and loyalty. Like those are going to be very good cultures for very different people. I also think about sports, right? You hire the GM who picks his coach or her coach, and then the system they want to run, and then they figure out what players will do well in their system. So, if you want to run and shoot offense, you don't want to load up with running backs because it's going to hard. How are they going to fit in your culture? They're, you're throwing the ball and they're going to want to run. So let's dive into each of these. In 2016, I actually wrote our first Vivid Vision with Cam's encouragement and Brian Scudamore after my first year at EMP, probably the most valuable thing, including getting our core values down to 3 that I got out of EMP. And we talked about, the goals we were going to hit, the awards we were going to win. And it was pretty scary. We were talking about tripling our business and going to all these countries and all this stuff. And we ended up doing all of it. Now we're on our second Vivid Vision for 2024, but it's just super anchoring to everyone. They're really clear about where we're going. And like I said, I showed it to our bank at one point and showed them that, we do that. I think we did a big private equity deal a few years ago. I think them seeing that when we laid out something, we almost perfectly executed that plan, was a really important decision in them wanting to work with our team. So I also values, I loved our 6 core values until at that same program at EMP, a really smart woman named Tanya in my class made a compelling case around why you wanted fewer. And at the end of the day, I think if people don't know them, they can't act on them. My definition of and not without an index card, even the Ritz-Carlton gets holed up and all this stuff, but people show up with like an index card and have to read off the values. I think that the DNA of someone who is successful at an organization, and I think one word, one line, one paragraph, everyone in our organization knows these. They may not know the sub thing under it, but they will hear it all the time, and they're tied to everything that we do, as you'll see in the upcoming slide. So how we use them. We use them for hiring. We have behavioral, with Camps Up, we have behavioral-based hiring questions. And I swear I say this in this presentation, without Cam here, but I told Cam we were really smart because we have behavioral-based hiring questions. And he said, well, how do your team know what a good answer is? Like, we're like, oh, good point. So then we added to our hiring guide, this is what a 10 sounds like, and this is what a 0 sounds like. When we're transitioning someone out, it is very often a result of one or more of the core values. When we're promoting someone, it is called out and is tied to the core values. We have end of year core value awards. We have core value shout outs in all of our calls. Like, you really can't escape hearing about these values. They actually are what we value. And again, that's really comes down to behaviors. These are the behaviors that we want people to demonstrate. And it ultimately it just drives their decision making, right? It's better than a lot of rule books and a lot of manuals to say, here are the core things that we want to make your decisions on. So as I said before, goals, there are a lot of different ways to do that. There's a lot of different programs out there. We use a program called Metronome with some of our consultants. All of our goals that re-engineer into that 3-year vision are in there quarterly, monthly, annually, who's responsible for them, green light, red light. It's very clear to everyone what the score is. In all these years, people have always said, like, when your people are remote, how do you trust them? How do you know they're working? I was like, look, everything we're doing is out there. The numbers are out there. The scorecards are out there. Everyone knows the rules of the game. And then in terms of those modifiers, again, we try to do things consistently. We have company calls at the same cadence. We have quarterly hub meetings, an annual all company meeting where everyone comes together. We are constantly collecting feedback on what we can do better and reviewing that. I strongly recommend using some sort of alignment system, whether it's EOS or gazelles or OKRs, to creates tremendous amount of predictability and consistency in your business. And then we have a core process for everything, probably too many things at some point. Our rule is, like, if you haven't done it before, we have a way of doing it really well. And by the way, if you can do it better, operate the operating system for everyone, improve the core process, push it out. Don't go doing all kinds of different things in different places. So we have a tremendous amount of documentation. And then on the clarity side, again, we're clear on our core values. We showed that before. When we do our check-ins, they're very aligned to the traction system of how are you doing on the core values? How are you doing on the quarterly priorities you committed to, which are on that dashboard? And what are your top 5 job responsibilities that were on your, when we hired you, that were on the sort of job rack? Like, so it was very clear that it would say, like, by 6 months, success looks like this. So it takes out a lot of ambiguity around who's doing well and not doing well. We are fully open book management. We have an all company dashboard. Everyone knows what's green, red, yellow. How's it going? Look, it's been a tough month or two right now. We're very honest with people. Like, hey, Q3 goals, we are behind on our goals. Here's what we're doing. Here are the changes that we need to make. And then again, that vivid vision provides a tremendous amount of clarity about where we're going. And I always stress the Patrick Lencioni rule of 7 times. I fail to heed this a lot. You might find yourself in your organization saying, I don't understand, people don't get this. We've said it like 2 or 3 times. And I think Lencioni said, people don't really hear things until you say it 7 times. So, creating that clarity, repeating things, saying it a different way over and over, it really makes a difference. And then again, that clarity really is helped by an alignment system. It doesn't matter which one you use. Everyone knows the rules of the game, the scoreboard, all the tools in the toolbox. So let's transition to, like, remote work or hybrid work and thinking about what remote employees need. Like I said, we've been doing this for a while, and there's 3 things I think that every employee needs in terms of thinking about being a productive remote employee. First is they need the right workspace. Second is the right daily structure and tactics, to do that, knowing that they're not in an office. So this looks a little bit different for people. You need to be set up well, right? So particularly if you're doing a pitch or otherwise, and you're sitting at your desk a lot, good equipment, monitor, chair, headset, standing desk. Also, really important to have a physically delineated space. I think it is important, particularly when you work from home, to be able to leave work, walk away. Someone on my team literally changes. It's like Clark Kent and Superman. Changes in the morning into work clothes, gets on the computer, changes out afterward. That signals to the family. And some of this takes a company investment, which I think is important. One of the best things I bought during COVID was a green screen, which runs my virtual background here. If you're making a big pitch or you're speaking to people like this, virtual backgrounds are cool, except for if your hands and head are disappearing. Buy a pop-up green screen and you look like $1 million. You buy a $70 microphone, a $50 desk light, and it just makes a huge difference in your presentation. And then in terms of being set up for success, I think there's some things that people need to learn, and some discipline they need to learn. I think they need a clean start and end to the day. I think a lot of people are actually missing their commute. They're rolling out of bed, they're turning on their cell phone, they're jumping right into bed. They need read the paper, look at the coffee, don't turn on the phone. And then at the end of the day, they need that kind of virtual commute home, like go for a walk, take the dog. Every time I would go down from the dinner table, like right to the kids all screaming at it, like it just was not a good transition for me on a Zoom call. So I'd start trying to wrap things up by 5:30, 5:45, grab the dog, go for a walk, do some yoga, meditate, try to create that buffer between work and home. And then there's energy management, thinking about the schedule, right? When are you good at focus work, and can you sync that time with other people? When do you need a break? How many meetings is going to be too much? I try to do more of my meetings and stuff in the afternoon. I know that I'm cognitively best in the morning, as are most people that are not night owls. And if I look and see, like on Monday, that I have 6 hours of calls and meetings, like I know I'm going to be slammed. I know I'm going to be tired. I got to think about, how am I going to take a break? How am I going to mix that up? And then again, how can I minimize the distractions? That's where the home office comes into play, and really kind of trying to separate, again, physical work. I think it's helpful to walk out of there, know you're done. Don't bring the laptop to bed. Don't bring it to your kitchen table. It just starts blurring all the lines. So that's what the people need. But more importantly, for the people in this room, I think leaders are going to need to make some changes to hiring going forward, and thinking about the culture and how they're going to run a business. Particularly if you want to go back to the office fully, not as much. But if you're going to have hybrid and remote, then you're going to need to look at hiring and onboarding a little bit differently. How you run effective meetings, which Cam has spoken ad nauseum about. And then you're going to need to shift to this philosophy of moving to outcomes. Managing to outcomes, and not inputs, which has been the default today. So look, not everyone excels working remotely, and not everyone will excel in your business's version of hybrid or remote work. So you're going to need a hiring system to find the right people who repeatedly kind of meet two distinct criteria. They're aligned with your culture, and they're going to be successful in a remote work environment. I'm a big fan of Jeff Smart. I think he does this better than anyone in terms of building a repeatable process. So, define and agree all the outcomes beforehand. What you'll see on that screen again is top drive responsibilities, and basically the stuff that's going to be on your performance review in 6 months. So that when we're talking about why you haven't sold $1 million in sales per quarter, it shouldn't be a surprise, because it was on the key KPI 6 month of how we're going to evaluate success in this job. And then again, with Cam's help, we screen for values, turn those into empirical answers. We test for aptitude. Again, someone shows up to a virtual interview for a remote job, not wearing the right clothes, in the dark, bad internet connection, like probably not going to be an ideal person for a remote environment. You want them to show up like that in sales to a client or to a big meeting. And then we standardize and control all the process. There's so much bias in hiring that I actually think you should keep the process very, very rigid. One of the things we ask at the end is, we have a disinterested person in there really pushing the team, because often the team needs to hire someone. And they're saying, is this person better than 90% of the people that we see? And do we think that they'll raise the bar? Onboarding is crucial. I always think we had a world-class onboarding program. But frankly, because we had to, you can't just have someone show up. A lot of in-person businesses get away with crappy onboarding programs because they're in person. They have someone show up, they have no plan for them. This was like my first day at work, and where they were like, hey, get him a computer and go shadow Winifred. And Winifred was great, and we became good friends, but there's not a world-class onboarding. If you ever seen a world-class onboarding program, it's usually that the person doesn't hit their desk for 3 weeks. They come in, they go do customer service for a week, they go into this training otherwise. So we schedule out all of their first 3 weeks. Like everything is planned out, from when they're meeting informally with some new teammates, when they're doing the Vivid Vision onboarding with me, when they're shadowing people, when they're doing their own learning out of our learning management system. It's just all laid out for them. We have someone whose full-time job it is to design the onboarding for each new person, because look, what starts well tends to end better. And there's nothing worse than starting a remote employee feeling totally disconnected from your organization. When you move out of your home, and I know Cam talks about this a lot, but I'll give you my quick take on it. You might realize there are a lot of things that you don't need interrupt anymore. And usually in a relationship, there's a keeper and a thrower outer. The thrower outer is usually the one who is correct. So I think what's been interesting is that like when you move to a different type of workplace, whether it's remote or hybrid, you might realize that some of your old meetings don't fit these norms and they're not even necessary. So don't just take all the in-person stuff and move it to video conference. Think about what you need, what can be adapted, and frankly, like what can be thrown out. And the first step for most online meetings is to cut them in half. They're diminishing returns the longer you keep people on a Zoom call. 60-minute meetings should be 30. One-on-one check-ons can be done in 15 to 30 minutes, not 30 to 60. Everyone, there seems to be some data forming that there's a 2 to 3 hour window of Zoom before people really get fatigued. The number one way to fix meeting culture, and I was big on this in EO and particularly in nonprofit meetings I'm on, is that like, get rid of your update meetings. So update meetings are where a lot of really smart, expensive people get on a call and update everyone on everything. And it's just it's not engaging. And finance chairs are really bad about this, especially on nonprofit. I mean, it's like someone reading me an Excel spreadsheet for 30 minutes. Like with my ADD, I want to start like, banging my head on the desk. And really like these meetings are like a monologue, and meetings should be a dialogue. So one of the things that we do is we use kind of Jeff Bezos's memo system. Like before a meeting, someone puts together a memo, there's pre-reading, there's documents, there's financials. Everyone is expected and puts everyone in the same field. So they're expected to read the memo and come to the meeting ready to discuss and debate. We really try to never read out any information that's not more than a few seconds where someone's just trying to say hi. And that's a way to cut down the time, is to get out the things that you were going to present. And again, then talk about, hey, the numbers are down. We could all see that by reading the finance deck. Now, what are we going to try to do as a team to get those up for the next couple of months? Another thing I became a lot bigger at starting during the pandemic was asynchronous video. There's some things where, your emotion needs to be seen or felt. I can't see all of you, but hopefully, by seeing me, you can see that I'm smiling and maybe I'm a nice guy and the temperament. There's also in global companies, you have time differences and stuff like that, but it can be really exhausting to write a long email. So I just got used to hit and record. I did it last week on something where I didn't have a lot of time. I was like, it's going to take me an hour to write the email. Hit record, deliver an update, send it to the company, send it to a person. There was a really kind of difficult thing I was dealing with a few years ago. I used it for like all company messaging during COVID and the outbreak because they were important messages. And I wanted people to see me, but we had people, I didn't want them all get on the call at the same time to hear a monologue. But then I realized like there were just some emails and stuff where I could respond with a video and explain all of my thoughts and not how to edit it. And again, they get the motion in it. You're not reading something long. Really like effective way to sometimes communicate virtually. But look, here's the number one thing that I think is changing, and that is people need to manage outcomes and not inputs. I think, again, in office, like this wasn't the right thing to do, but people would focus on, hey, Cam's in here at 8 o'clock or Jesse leaves at 6 o'clock. And, they're just looking at input metrics. If you set output metrics, it's really what we want. And look, this is intuitive when we look at sales. If I told all of you that you could have, and sales does this well, salesperson A who works 60 hours a week, makes 200 calls and sells $500,000 a year, or salesperson B is 30 hours a week, 100 calls and $1 million a year, there's no one in this room, I hope, who would pick salesperson number one. We don't measure them on their inputs. We measure them on their outputs. If there's a problem with an output, then that's time to pop open the hood and take a look at the inputs. Like if they're not selling, are they calling people? Are they emailing? But that's not, I don't want to measure them on their calls or emails, because I'll just get, again, I believe in the quote that Buffett said, show me the incentive and I'll tell you the behavior, then I'm going to get more calls and emails. I want sales. So we understand this in sales, but we don't understand this as intuitively in other areas. And we haven't figured out how to manage outcomes. We haven't identified outcomes as easily as our sales org has. And this is really where these dashboards and KPIs and targets and things that are shared, if the sales team each has a 300 KPI, 100 KPI goal, you'd have 300. And if they're below the 300, well, whose is red and whose is not red? Similarly, if it's customer service, maybe it's maybe it's the client feedback rate or NPS score, or maybe it's the amount of things that needed delegation that week. But again, we try to really think about what are the outcomes that we care about. Again, I don't care whether someone's working at 8 o'clock a.m. or 9 o'clock a.m. if we have the outcomes right. And then delegation, look, huge part of management, normally even more important remotely, where you can't manage, right? So you're not gonna be able to hover over them. You're gonna have to trust them. I like this notion of the 85% rule. This is what I train our new managers on, that, successful delegation is when you've done something 85% right, when you're not involved, not when it's 100% right. And remote work is dependent on trust. Like, I think people will do better when you trust them. I think it's really important to give trust first in a healthy culture. Trust people until they give you a reason not to. But I always like trust but verify. Look, there's a reason why the world has auditors. Sometimes people aren't doing what they said, and it's fine to do a deep dive and check something out. And I think that's, again, what keeps everyone honest. But you need to set expectations for your colleagues, managers, and reports when you're available and when you're not. We operate on in-office standards. If you go to the bathroom, if you have lunch, you have a coffee break, I don't need to know where you are. But remote work does not mean doing whatever you want, wherever you want. You've got to be available to others. You can't disappear during the middle of the day, accountable for key metrics. I think people who regularly can't be found during work hours when they're supposed to be online or supposed to be available, they lose credibility pretty quickly with the team. I also get asked, like, so what do you use to spy on your employees? And again, I think that this is a inputs and outcome things. If you set the correct outcomes, manage according to them, you really don't need to spy on your employees. It's a zero-sum game, right? There are a lot of tech companies that are using the software what they're mostly managing with their companies are keystrokes. And just so you know, one of the top sellers on Amazon right now is a mouse mover. So if you are using keystroke software and your employees are using mouse moving software, you have lost in whatever industry that you are in, and are definitely playing the wrong game. All right. So what is the way forward here as we wrap up? Look, there's fundamentally three choices. There's and a lot of companies, look, I don't know that it's the right choice based on the demand in their marketplace for talent, but look, it's back to the office or you lose your job. At least to me, they're clear. I give them credit for that. There's some other people, right? Our lease expired April 2020. We won the lottery. We're ditching the office and we're going fully remote. Also clear. The bulk, though, of companies, I think, are going to fall into this world of hybrid. And honestly, this one worries me the most. And not because I don't think hybrid can work, but I think hybrid needs to be a strategy, not the absence of a strategy of making a decision. Or it's going to cause a lot of problems and confusion. I've heard 8 to 9 different versions of hybrid. I've heard you come in on these days of the week, you come in half the time, you come in for only these things, you can live anywhere, you can't live anywhere. I mean, there's key questions that people want answered, in a hybrid workplace. And this is why, if you haven't picked a strategy, a lot of your employees may be, hedging the fence and looking at different jobs and not sure if they have to come back to work or can move or otherwise. So, that is, I think, really important to think through these things so that you can be executing on that. Also, people want to get together, even though you might not be working every day. And we've been remote. I think that without human connection, people are more likely to turn over and lead your company. We have focused on having an all-person global summit every year. Whatever we would have spent on an office, it's more than that. We brought 350 people to summer camp last summer and just had an incredible 3 or 4 days and just did stuff that would carry the culture together through the whole year. So it's not that people don't want to see each other. It's just they don't want to be in traffic for an hour each day, or they have other things that interfere with maybe a regular workday schedule. So to wrap it up, I think the expansion of remote work is really changing a long-held paradigm. People used to live and work in a city, then they moved to a suburb. They would commute back into that city a lot. And I really think that suburb to city bridge is closing. As people age and they're more interested in suburban life, I think they're looking if that's where they're going to live, they're going to look where they're going to work. 55% of the people responded to an Upwork study that they wanted to relocate after COVID over 2 hours away from their current location. So clearly that's a lot of a disruption. And this is a lot of the people who are the 30 and 40-year-old having a family kind of middle managers. So, if you want a company that's going to attract these people, then you're going to have a value position that's aligned. And in terms of building a culture, I always say, like, fly your flag, be transparent about who you are. Our culture is very endemic to how we work and our core values. We're fast-paced digital client service agency. Our values are own it, embrace relationships, and excel and improve. We are a remote work first company. We can't hide that. We are in client services and we are fast-paced. If you don't want any of those three, you probably don't want to work at our company. And even though we've had a lot of nice things said on Glassdoor, these are actually cons from people who left 4 and 5-star reviews. And you can see they're trying to, like, get the people that would be the wrong fit for our culture not to apply. Like, they're saying, hey, it's fast-paced, they're self-motivated, fast-paced, working from home does not mean it's easy. So I think it's interesting. Again, they're trying to make sure we attract the right people who get our culture. So, just to wrap it up, we're not going back to 2019. I think if you're waiting around for that, you're going to be waiting a long time. We are long past the point where companies should have picked a strategy. In fact, a lot of them aren't executing well on the strategy, and it's hard to execute on a strategy when you haven't picked one. And like I said, if you do decide on hybrid, it really needs to be a strategy in itself, not the absence of a strategy where everyone gets to figure out what that means to them, or it is going to cause a ton of confusion. So if you're interested in more detail in any of this, a lot of this material is covered much more in depth in my book, How to Thrive in the Virtual Workplace. There's also a course version of that book at Robert Glazier. We're running a thing on right now. So if you want the full video or something to share with your team. So love to open up to questions. And Cam, I don't know if you have a mic or how you want to do it, or you want to hand it to you.
I'll answer the questions for the book. We're
Okay.
also going to share this video with the other 140 members of the CO Alliance as well. And with this group that saw it today, they'll get a copy of it as well. John, if you want to go off of this screen so they can see you, and then we'll go to Q&A. Thank you. Who's got questions for Bob? Yeah, Cody.
So we were all virtual at our company, and then we recently had gotten an office last year. So we have some of our staff in office, some are out of office, but we're trying to figure out a strategy of, like, how can some people, work out of the office versus the ones that are in office, to the ones that weren't in the office. So we just kind of have this situation where we're a little bit unclear and uncertain, like you were saying, and we don't have a strong strategy. So what would you say are, like, the steps to putting together what that should look like? Because we have different expectations now from people that have been working remote for a couple of years versus the ones that got hired and they're now in office.
Yeah, look, I can't tell you what your strategy should be. It should be tied to your business needs. It should be tied to your culture. And then you should be really clear about it. I mean, some high versions of hybrid are do whatever you want. But again, to your point, if that's your strategy, then you need to have a plan to connect with the people that aren't in the office. You need to maybe have, if they're not located nearby, you may need, virtual social get-togethers. You may need to set up meetings and stuff that replace the water cooler. You may decide, how are you going to do Zoom meetings? Does everyone go on individually, or does it go in the meeting? One of the companies that I did some work with last year, called Veracode, they had an interesting solution to this. You could do whatever you wanted to, but you had to sort of declare what you were twice a year, and you could change it, because then they knew what they had to do with the fully remote people. They knew what they had to do with the people that were going to be in there a day or two a week. And I actually thought that was a really smart choice. You could change it, but they wanted to know, because then they made sure that their policies and systems, caught that. But again, I think you got to go from business need and what you want. The other question I get asked a lot, people are like, how can I get people back in the office to things? Because it is important and we want them to be there for things. I would normally never tell anyone this advice, and I would more my kids or anyway, but you use FOMO. You plan a really amazing event and you take pictures and you post it all over social media, and you make them feel like shit for missing it. Like, that is literally the only thing that seems to work to get the people to come back in the office who don't want to come back in the office.
It's a great mental note of what we have to do to the 140 people that get to this event, is just make sure they really missed out.
Yeah, have them, like, all these guys hugging Richard Branson, get a fake thing of him, and he was there, and this is what you missed out on.
Exactly. Michael.
You mentioned a home office setup. How much do you budget for that per employee? Does it vary? on the role? And are those company assets or is that like assigning loans?
Yeah. So we've had to switch a couple things. Now we give people a computer. We would give them a stipend, they would buy a computer, but as turnover got high, like, and people were younger and stayed less, like now we give them, we actually have a computer drop off, they get it. We give them a stipend, they get an initial amount, and then I think they get every other year. I think it's like 500 or 750, and then they can use it on, approved list of stuff. I mean, again, some people really want the dual monitor, some people want the light, some people want a better chair. And then they just keep it. Yeah, we're not going to ship the stuff and take it. So it's just a reimbursement. I've lost this battle at our company, but I always love the aspect now that we're bigger. I mean, I love the concept of a copay. Sometimes people will buy stuff they don't want because it's free, even if it's a 10 or 20% copay, and you say, look, we'll cover up to $1,000 of stuff, but you pay 20%. That just also makes it's still a good deal if they're going to keep it, but it makes sure people are buying stuff that they want or need, not just trying to like use up the flex account.
Good, it is. Other questions? I got a question. Yeah, go ahead.
So how much can you, I'm putting my HR
Yeah.
hat on, how much can you ask around the workable space? Because I have some challenges right now with some people working from home. And I would love, from my perspective, to start asking questions and that be part of the interview process if it's a fully remote role, but I'm just not sure I can.
I don't think so far people that work from home aren't a protected class as far as I know. This is where you can, you can, I mean, they will be soon if they're not, but in Oregon, don't hire people in Oregon, California, that's a whole separate discussion. You can set the standards. You can say here, like we tell people pretty clearly in the interview process that like we are flexible and it's great if you have kids and stuff, but you are not to be working at home while you're watching your kids. Like that it is not, that is not, if you have to run to daycare, that's great. But we suggest that people have a space, but you can set standards, right? You can say, if you want to work from home, that means for us that you're in a quiet place with a clean background with good lighting and a good microphone. Like I definitely think you can establish standards as a to me, this is again flexibility and accountability. You are afforded the flexibility if you are accountable to the standard that we set up.
Thank you.
It's funny you mentioned all the clean background. I had someone submit a video submission to work for me, and in the background of his video submission was all this huge pile of laundry, and he goes, sorry, everything's a bit of a mess right now, but I just wanted to tell you, I'm like, I'm not even watching this video. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a good point, Cam. I think people are conflating two things. There was a point when everyone was having kindergarten in their next room and their kids were running in, their cat was, well, we were all in it together and no one cared and there was some grace. But we have two standards. If you're having an internal call, you can come from the gym, you can be wearing whatever you want. Otherwise, when you're on a client call, you're expected to be in a professional, clean, well-lit, well set up background. There was a grace period. I think we have now gone back to like some normal expectations. Again, do you want someone talking to a key client or key sales prospect with their laundry or their cat? Like I said, the best $150 that I spent during COVID was this pop-up green screen. So, there sits on the floor. There's the office, makes any virtual background look good. This setup is like $200. Like it's not, between the mic and the light and I also bought a little clip-on camera because they're much better than the cameras that come in the computer.
Now, do you do the Zoom mullet where you got business on top and beach shorts on the bottom?
I mean, I'm not going to let you know. Maybe.
Next question. Any other questions for Bob right now? All right, Bob Glazier, thank you so much for sharing with us.
All right. Thanks, Cam. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.